Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds on something huge for anyone in the beauty space. We're taking all that research you sent over and building basically the essential playbook for picking a private label partner. And we're focusing specifically on, the world of clean beauty, which has its own unique challenges.
It really does. This isn't your old school private label anymore, just slapping a label on a generic cream.
What we're seeing in 2025 and what the sources make really clear is that it's this balancing act. You absolutely need that speed to market. Everyone does.
Right. That's table stakes now.
Exactly. But, that speed has got to be backed up by some serious heavy lifting on the regulatory side. We're talking extreme diligence, radical transparency in the supply chain, and really thinking hard about risk mitigation.
Okay, so the mission for you, listening right now, is to finish this deep dive with a solid, practical way to evaluate these potential partners. A buyer-first approach. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Help you cut down that risk, shorten your timeline maybe, but critically, without compromising those clean label promises that, let's face it, your whole brand is probably built on.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack how we're going to do that. We've kind of broken this down into 4 main areas based on the source material. First, compliance and certifications. Think of that as your shield. Then, ingredient transparency, the clean promise itself. Third, operational excellence, which is like your safety net.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, the business side strategy, logistics, cost. We'll hit those key comparison points. Regulatory readiness, MOQs, lead times, packaging, and the total cost, not just the unit price.
So we absolutely have to start with compliance.
Yeah.
Because in clean beauty, with all the natural ingredients, regulations are, well, they're a moving target, constantly. Rules keep changing on ingredient safety, what you can and can't say, sustainability claims.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It really is. Your partner has to be like your proactive shield, right?
Yeah.
Staying ahead of it.
Exactly. Because brands get burned all the time, assuming last year's compliance binder is still okay. It probably isn't.
Can you give an example, like a recent shift that would just instantly mess things up if a partner wasn't on top of it?
Oh, easily. Think about recent EU changes to fragrance regs. Those impact formulas globally if they contain certain compounds. If your partner's just sitting on old data, boom, your whole product line could get stopped at customs. Or you're suddenly facing a massive, expensive recall or reformulation.
Wow. Okay, so proactive means more than just having documents filed away somewhere. They need actual ongoing intelligence.
Precisely. Ongoing regulatory intelligence, updated safety data, what we call regulatory mapping by market. It has to be dynamic.
A living document.
Yeah, living document of restrictions. So when rules tighten, your claims are still legally solid and you aren't left scrambling. Maria Chen, who's a big voice in this space, she called it needing a living regulatory backbone.
A living regulatory backbone? I like that. But it also sounds potentially expensive, especially for a smaller brand. How do you verify this without spending a fortune on audits yourself?
You focus on the proof points.
Yeah.
And that really starts with the certifications consumers actually look for and trust. Things like Leaping Bunny or PETA approved for cruelty-free, the Vegan Society mark, and organic standards like Cosmos or USDA Organic. Those are sort of non-negotiable for many clean beauty shoppers.
Right.
So the actionable step for you, ask for copies of their current audit reports, check the validity dates on those certificates, and ask the critical question, how do formula changes impact these certifications? Dr. Elena Rossi, a QA director mentioned in the sources, nailed it. Certification is not a one-and-done event.
That's a great point. It needs constant upkeep.
It does. And if a potential partner gets cagey about showing you recent audit proof, that's a huge red flag right there.
Okay, and beyond audits, the sources really hammer home the need for legal protection in the contract itself, not just relying on trust.
Oh, absolutely critical. If you take away one thing for your contract negotiation, make it a strong change control clause. It needs to be explicitly tied to regulatory updates. Spell out who's responsible for what, the timelines for any needed reformulation or label changes. This protects your launch, protects your products already on the shelf. It's vital.
Okay, so we've got the regulatory shield hopefully in place with that backbone, but like you said, that's only half of it. Consumers today, especially clean beauty consumers, they don't just trust a pile of compliance papers. They want transparency. They want to know what's in the bottle, sure, but also where it came from.
Yeah, transparency is core. And today, that means more than just accurate INCI names on the label. It means clear allergen warnings, proper fragrance disclosure, even the incidental allergens, and increasingly real info about supply chain ethics.
Like palm oil sourcing.
Exactly. Access to supplier declarations on things like sustainable palm oil or even the solvents used in extraction. That's what backs up a truly clean promise.
And that level of detail requires serious traceability, which, let's be honest, is probably where a lot of potential partners might fall down. They list ingredients, fine, but can they track the specific stuff that went into your batch?
Precisely. That's the difference. Strong traceability needs a really robust supplier qualification program like pre-vetted approved vendor lists. And critically, lot-level traceability. That means tracking each raw material from its original supplier lot number all the way through manufacturing to the finished batch code on your final product.
Which is essential if something goes wrong.
Absolutely. For investigating issues or, worst case, for doing fast targeted recalls, you need that granularity.
Okay, practical step then. If I'm vetting partners, what's the single best piece of paper I can ask for to really compare how well they track things?
Ask for a current bill of materials, a BIBOM. For a typical product, they make something similar to what you want to produce. But don't just accept a list of ingredients. A good BOMOM will show supplier names, the specific lot numbers of the ingredients used in that batch, and the corresponding certificates of analysis, the COAs.
Ah, okay, so that level of detail proves they're managing the supply chain properly, down to the batch level.
Exactly. If they give you a BOM without specific lot numbers or readily available COAs for those lots, that tells you they might not be able to trace materials effectively if there's a problem. It's a gap in their control.
Big gap.
Huge. And remember, all your claims, vegan, cruelty-free, sustainably sourced, whatever they all have, to be backed up by credible data that comes from this traceability system. A really good partner actually helps you design claims that are truthful, non-misleading, and totally verifiable through their records.
Makes sense. We're also seeing, much more focus on sensitive ingredients, allergens, palm oil derivatives.
Absolutely essential. Clear disclosure on palm-derived ingredients, ideally with percentages and origin if possible. And for safety, partners need detailed allergen matrices. They need to track known fragrance allergens across all their formulas, not just yours, to prevent cross-contamination. Clean beauty really means full disclosure, trying to minimize those gray areas. Okay, let's shift from the paperwork in the supply chain to the actual factory floor, the manufacturing itself. Operational excellence here is all about having formal, repeatable systems. Systems designed to protect your brand's reputation and, most importantly, consumer safety.
Right, so we're talking about those baseline standards first, the absolute must-haves just to be in the game.
Yes, the big one is ISO 22716. That's the global standard defining good manufacturing practices, or GMP, specifically for cosmetics. It's the backbone. You'll also often see partners with ISO 9001, which is broader. It covers their overall quality management system for the whole company.
Yep.
You really need to see these as a starting point.
But one of the experts you quoted, Dr. Priya Kapoor, she stressed that just having the certificate isn't enough.
Correct. You put it perfectly. GMP certification is just the baseline. The real value, the thing that truly differentiates partners, is how well they actually implement the processes behind it. How meticulous are their batch records? How formal and documented is their change control process? How rigorous is their supplier qualification program? Sloppy execution here leads directly to problems. Big problems.
Expensive, brand-damaging problems.
Exactly. Recalls, bad press, lost consumer trust.
Let's zoom in on stability testing for a second. Because for clean beauty, right, where you might be using fewer traditional preservatives or more natural systems, this feels absolutely critical.
It is non-negotiable. It's the safety gate for your product. Stability testing confirms that your product actually performs as intended, keeps its texture, stays effective, looks right, smells right over its entire shelf life. Without really rigorous stability testing, including accelerated testing and long-term real-time testing, especially with natural formulas, you risk things like separation, discoloration, weird smells, or worse, microbes of growth.
Yeah, nobody wants that. And okay, so when issues do happen, because sometimes they just do, right?
Yeah.
A raw material batch is off, something separates unexpectedly. That's where this KPI system comes in.
Precisely. KPA stands for Corrective and Preventive Action. Think of it like the black box recorder for manufacturing issues. It's not just about noting down that something went wrong. A proper KPA system is formal. It documents the issue, forces a root cause investigation. Was it the material? A process error? Packaging failure, and then, crucially, ensures that preventive measures are put in place and verified so it doesn't happen again.
So it's about fixing the system, not just the one bad batch.
Exactly. If a partner doesn't have a robust, documented, audited KPA system, they're just firefighting. They're not actually eliminating the underlying problems.
Okay, so if I'm doing my due diligence, maybe a site visit or asking for documentation before signing, what should I expect to see related to this?
You should expect to see organized, easily accessible documentation,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in a digital portal. Things like their supplier qualification records, the validated test methods they use for releasing finished products, detailed validation reports for their processes and equipment. Basically, you need confidence that they are audit ready at all times, that their processes aren't just written down, but are actively followed and demonstrably under control.
All right, time to pivot again. Let's talk strategy, logistics, and inevitably the money side of things. Because the partner you choose really dictates a lot here, your control, your flexibility, your margins, and it often starts with how you approach formula development itself.
Yeah, the sources laid out basically three main paths. There's full in-house R&D, max control, you own all the IP, but it's definitely the slowest and usually the most expensive route.
Mm,
Then at the other end, you've got library lines or stock formulas, super fast, cost-effective, great for maybe simpler products like a basic cleanser or body lotion. But, you get limited uniqueness, limited IP claims.
right. And then the middle path, probably the most common, is co-development. And this seems like where the IP ownership risks can really get tricky.
Oh, absolutely. Co-development, where you bring your concept and maybe some key ingredients, and they provide the formulation expertise. This requires a crystal clear written agreement on IP ownership. You have to define upfront who owns the final formula, who owns any new discoveries or, importantly, manufacturing process improvements that come out of developing your product.
Can you give a quick example of where that goes wrong? An IP trap.
Sure. A common one is you think you own the formula IP, which you might, but the contract might be vague or cleverly worded to let the manufacturer retain ownership of the process they developed to make it efficiently or stable. Maybe they figure out a unique way to emulsify your specific ingredients or a novel preservative blend that works for your tricky natural system. If your contract doesn't explicitly grant you ownership or at least unrestricted rights to all elements created for your project, they could potentially stop you from moving that formula to another manufacturer later on.
Ouch. Okay. So get that IP clause watertight. What about logistics? Let's talk brass tacks. MOQs, minimum order quantities, and lead times. What's realistic?
Realistically, you're often looking at lead times from, say, final sample approval to getting the first full production run delivered. That's typically somewhere in the range of 6 to 14 weeks, sometimes longer if custom packaging is involved.
Okay. And MOQs.
Well, for maybe a small pilot run or a very first trial, you might find someone willing to do a few hundred units, but that's rare and usually expensive per unit. For stock formulas, or once you get into custom formulas and packaging, you're typically looking at several thousand units minimum, often 5,000 units, sometimes 10,000, to get decent per unit pricing.
Right. And a good partner isn't just quoting times and quantities, they're helping manage the risks around those things.
A mature partner absolutely should be. They should be talking to you about risk mitigation. Things like dual sourcing key raw materials or critical packaging components so you're not reliant on a single supplier who might have issues, or suggesting staggered launch plans, maybe starting with a smaller quantity to test the waters and ensure the supply chain is robust before you commit to a massive order. It's about planning for bumps in the road.
Smart. Okay, finally, pricing. We mentioned earlier, it's not just the unit cost. We need to look at the total cost of ownership, TCO.
Yes, TCO. It's the unit cost plus all the other direct and indirect costs that pop up over the product's life. And this is where you really need to pay attention. We have to warn you, the listener, about those common, sneaky, hidden costs that can blow your budget.
Like what? Give us the top offenders.
Okay, big ones include mandatory storage fees for your finished goods if you don't pick them up almost immediately. Reformulation charges that can be surprisingly high, even for minor tweaks down the line. Unexpected labeling change costs if regulations shift or you enter a new market. And sometimes even regulatory filing fees that you thought were included but weren't.
Wow. So that super attractive low unit price they quoted up front could get completely eaten up by storage fees alone if your launch gets delayed by a few weeks.
Precisely. So if you know you're going to be launching multiple SKUs or you anticipate needing flexibility for formula tweaks or market expansions, you must negotiate favorable terms on these things up front. Try to get included storage for a reasonable period, maybe capped reformulation costs for minor changes, clarity on all regulatory fees. Otherwise, that low unit price is just, well, it's a bit of a mirage. The indirect costs will kill your margin. So at the end of the day, All this knowledge is great, but it comes down to rigorous due diligence. You have to have a solid vetting process to turn this framework into the right decision.
Right. Let's talk red flags. If you're a brand owner looking at proposals, talking to potential partners, what are those clear warning signs? The things that should make you immediately think, uh-oh, maybe these guys aren't equipped for the demands of clean beauty.
Okay, flashing red flags to watch for. First, vague or incomplete documentation. If they hesitate or can't quickly produce a recent relevant audit report, like ISO 22716 or a GMP audit, big warning sign. Walk away maybe. Second, an unverified or non-transparent supplier list. You should have visibility into at least your key Tier 1 and maybe Tier 2 suppliers for critical ingredients. Third, watch out for frequent, unexplained changes to formulas or packaging components during development or even after launch. It suggests poor planning or unstable sourcing. And fourth, a really critical one, the lack of a formal documented KP program. If they can't show you how they systematically investigate and prevent problems, they're likely just patching issues as they arise. That's risky.
Definitely risky. Okay, so beyond just reading their glossy brochure or website, what are the practical vetting steps you absolutely recommend?
Number one, get verifiable references.
Right.
Talk to other brands, ideally similar to yours, who currently work with them. Ask tough questions. Number two, arrange a site visit if possible, or at least a very thorough virtual tour. Don't just see the lobby. Look at the QA labs, the production lines, the warehousing, how they manage inventory segregation. And number three, crucially, use a standardized scorecard. Evaluate all potential partners against the same criteria based on your specific needs, quality standards, risk tolerance, compliance requirements, transparency expectations. It keeps the comparison objective.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's zoom out for a second. Connecting this to the bigger picture, what are the major trends shaping the future of clean beauty that a forward-thinking partner should already be exploring or even mastering?
We identified three big ones from the research. First, microbiome-focused skincare, using pre, pro, and postbiotics. This is moving fast from niche science into the mainstream, and it often requires specialized handling and testing. Second, waterless or solid formulations. These are gaining traction because they reduce packaging waste and often lessen the need for traditional preservatives. Partners need experience with these formats. And third, refillable packaging and high recycled content materials. This is becoming almost standard expectation, especially for premium or eco-conscious brands. Your partner needs established supply chains and expertise here.
Right. And we saw a great example of pulling this all together in that Ingredientsage case study mentioned in the sources. They managed amazing speed and integrated these future trends.
Yeah, that was impressive. They launched a complex product with fully compliant, regulatory-ready labeling in just 8 weeks. That's incredibly fast. But the really cool part was their digital traceability feature. They linked detailed ingredient origin data directly to a QR code on consumer packaging. That's taking transparency to the next level, data-backed proof right in the consumer's hand. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly comprehensive, a really deep dive into what it truly takes to find a top-tier private label partner in today's clean beauty market. I think we've clearly established it's less about just finding the cheapest supplier and much more about risk transfer, right? You're essentially paying a good partner to expertly manage these huge regulatory, operational, and supply chain complexities so that you can focus on building your brand and connecting with your customers.
Exactly. And if we boil it all down, maybe the key insight from that industry trend panel section is this. The future really belongs to the brands that can manage both things. They need that fast execution, yes, but it has to be paired with what they call transparency-first storytelling.
Mm.
And all those things we talked about, the robust compliance, the deep traceability, the solid QA systems, the KEA program, that's the evidence. That's the proof that allows you to tell that transparency story authentically and truthfully.
So for you, the listener, maybe the ultimate question to ask yourself when you're evaluating a potential partner comes down to this. Can they actually provide the hard, verifiable data, the lot level tracking, the third-party certifications, the audit trails needed to prove, right down at the individual product level, exactly how your ingredients came to be and what the real impact of your packaging is? Because that level of proof, that's the real test of a genuine clean beauty promise in 2025 and beyond.